If you could peel modern life down to its bare skeleton, stripping away the steel frames, the concrete, the glass, and the plastic, what remains would not be oil pipelines or power lines. It would be something far more delicate and far more dangerous to lose. A web of microscopic circuits etched into silicon. That invisible network is the true nervous system of civilization. By 2026, the idea of a technology sector no longer makes sense. Technology is not a corner of the economy. It is the economy. Farming equipment, hospital scanners, financial markets, logistics networks, social media, artificial intelligence, and modern weapons systems all depend on the same thing: semiconductors. A single modern car contains more than 1,000 chips, controlling everything from fuel injection to braking. Without them, the vehicle is nothing more than shaped metal. For most of the 20th century, global power revolved around oil. Countries fought wars, staged coups, and redrew borders to secure energy supplies. But comparing chips to oil understates the danger of the moment we are living in. Oil is abundant and interchangeable. When one supply is disrupted, another can be found somewhere else on the planet. Prices rise, but civilization continues. Advanced semiconductors do not work that way. They are not interchangeable. They are not widely distributed. They are among the most complex objects humanity has ever learned to produce. And at the highest level, they are manufactured at scale in only one place on Earth. That place is a small, densely populated island, sitting on active fault lines, directly across from a rising superpower that claims it as its own territory. And at the center of this reality is not a nation, but a single company. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, is not merely important, it is foundational. Roughly 90% of the world's most advanced chips, those used for artificial intelligence, advanced computing, cutting-edge weapons, and next-generation communications, come from its factories. If you are holding a flagship smartphone, using a cloud server, training an AI model, or flying a modern fighter jet, the silicon powering it almost certainly originated in a sterile clean room in Taiwan. This level of concentration is unprecedented in industrial history. It is not a monopoly in the traditional sense. It is something more dangerous, a single point of failure for the global system. If TSMC were forced to shut down tomorrow, whether by earthquake, blockade, cyber attack, or war, the world would not experience a slowdown. It would experience something closer to neurological collapse. Supply chains would freeze. Production lines would stop. Entire industries would fail simultaneously. This situation did not emerge by chance. It was built deliberately, over decades, through a strategy that Taiwanese leaders quietly refined after realizing a hard truth. Taiwan could never defeat China in a conventional military confrontation. It could not outbuild or outgun the People's Liberation Army. So instead, it pursued a different form of defense. Rather than relying on tanks and missiles, Taiwan embedded itself so deeply into the global economy that its destruction would harm everyone. The logic was simple and ruthless. If the prosperity of the United States, Europe, Japan, and even China depended on Taiwan's factories, then no major power could afford to let those factories fall. This strategy came to be known as the Silicon Shield. Taiwan made itself indispensable. Its survival became intertwined with global stability. Any attack on the island would not be a regional conflict. It would be a planetary economic crisis. The strength of that shield lies in the manufacturing process itself. Producing leading-edge chips is not mass production in the traditional sense. It is closer to applied physics at the edge of what is possible. Billions of transistors, smaller than a virus, are etched onto silicon wafers using extreme ultraviolet light. The machines that perform this process are among the most complex devices ever built, costing hundreds of millions of dollars each, and operating at tolerances measured in atoms. Only a handful of companies can even attempt this, and only one has mastered it at scale. TSMC did not win this position through luck. It won by committing to relentless, capital-intensive execution, while others hesitated. Former giants of the industry prioritized shareholder returns and short-term efficiency. TSMC prioritized learning, volume, and precision, year after year. The result is a strange and deeply uncomfortable paradox. The most advanced military alliance in human history now depends on foreign factories for the components that power its weapons. The industrial backbone of modern democracies rests on infrastructure that sits within missile range of an authoritarian rival. And what was once meant to deter aggression is increasingly seen by Beijing as a prize. For China's leadership, Taiwan is not just a political issue. It is symbolic, strategic, and technological. Control over Taiwan's semiconductor capacity would mean control over the future of artificial intelligence, advanced surveillance, and modern warfare. If those factories could be captured intact, China's leap to technological dominance would be immediate. This creates a nightmare scenario for everyone involved. If the United States believes that Taiwan's fabs are about to fall into Chinese hands, there are serious discussions about whether destroying them might be preferable to letting them be seized. The idea is brutal but logical. If the prize cannot be secured, remove it from the board entirely. Even without an invasion, China has options. It does not need to storm beaches or fire missiles to paralyze the world. A limited maritime quarantine would be enough. Semiconductor fabs consume enormous volumes of highly specialized chemicals and gases. Cut off those supplies, and production halts within days. No explosions required. The economic impact of such a move would be immediate and staggering. Smartphones would disappear from shelves. Car factories would shut down. Cloud providers would struggle to maintain servers. Hospitals would face equipment shortages. The estimated cost of a prolonged disruption runs into trillions of dollars, far exceeding the damage of past financial crises. This places every major power in an impossible position. The United States cannot abandon Taiwan without undermining its credibility and its economy. China cannot destroy Taiwan's semiconductor industry without crippling its own technological ambitions. And Taiwan itself lives with the knowledge that its greatest protection is also the reason it could become ground zero of the next global catastrophe. To understand how the world allowed itself to become so vulnerable, we have to rewind to a time when chip-making looked very different. In the late 20th century, American semiconductor companies controlled everything. They designed their chips, built their factories, and manufactured their products domestically. The knowledge of how to design and how to produce silicon evolved together. Manufacturing was considered a core strategic capability, not a cost to be minimized. But financial logic began to change that mindset. Building factories was expensive, risky, and slow. Designing chips was clean, scalable, and profitable. Investors rewarded companies that shed heavy assets and focused on intellectual property. Over time, American firms outsourced the hardest part of the process. What seemed like efficiency was actually amnesia. As manufacturing moved offshore, so did learning. The companies running the fabs accumulated experience with every wafer produced. They refined processes, solved edge case failures, and advanced faster with each iteration. Eventually, the center of gravity shifted. A key turning point came when one of the most influential consumer products in history was underestimated. A revolutionary phone required a new kind of processor. One company decided the margins were too low and the risk too high. Another accepted the challenge. The product exploded. The volumes skyrocketed, and the manufacturing partner reinvested every dollar into staying ahead. By the time competitors realized what was happening, the gap was no longer measurable in quarters, it was measured in generations of technology. Today, the most valuable chip designers on Earth cannot manufacture a single advanced processor themselves. Their brilliance depends entirely on access to Taiwanese production. If that access disappears, their revenue disappears with it. Governments are now scrambling to reverse decades of decisions. Subsidies are offered. Factories are planned. But rebuilding an ecosystem takes more than money. It takes people, culture, patience, and time. Those are not easily imported. For the next several years, the reality is unavoidable. The global economy remains balanced on a narrow strip of land in the Western Pacific. The Silicon Shield still stands, but it is under constant pressure. And as tensions rise, the question is no longer whether this dependency is dangerous. The question is how long the world can keep pretending it isn't. The danger of this moment is not just that the world depends on Taiwan. It is that everyone involved understands the dependency, and yet no one has a clean way out. This is what makes the semiconductor crisis fundamentally different from past supply shocks. It is not a surprise vulnerability. It is a known trap. Military planners often imagine dramatic scenarios because they are easier to visualize. Amphibious landings, missile barrages, dogfights over the Taiwan Strait. But the most realistic threat does not look like war at all. It looks like paperwork, customs inspections, safety regulations, maritime advisories, a slow tightening of access that never quite crosses the threshold that would justify immediate retaliation. In this gray zone, ships are delayed instead of sunk. Insurance premiums skyrocket. Suppliers hesitate. And then, quietly, the flow of materials stops. Semiconductor fabrication depends on a constant stream of ultra-pure chemicals, rare gases, and replacement components. These are not stockpiled in large quantities. Fabs are optimized for efficiency, not siege conditions. When the inputs stop arriving, the machines cannot run. Within days, production would begin to shut down. Within weeks, the consequences would ripple outward. The first industries to feel the impact would be the least visible to consumers, but the most foundational. Automotive plants would idle. Industrial equipment manufacturers would miss delivery deadlines. Telecommunications firms would delay network upgrades. Then the effects would reach the public. Device launches would be postponed indefinitely. Prices for existing electronics would surge. Repairs would become impossible as replacement parts disappear. Even everyday infrastructure would degrade. Traffic systems, power grids, and logistics networks rely on a steady supply of specialized chips. Once failures begin, they cascade. The cloud economy would face a slower but more ominous decline. Data centers are not static monuments. They are living systems that require constant renewal. Servers age out. Components fail. Without new processors, capacity shrinks. Services slow. Outages become common. The internet, as people know it today, would not collapse overnight, but it would become less reliable, less responsive, and more fragile with each passing month. Healthcare systems would confront a different kind of crisis. Modern medicine is inseparable from electronics. Diagnostic machines, monitoring devices, implantable technology, and pharmaceutical manufacturing all depend on semiconductors. Shortages would force difficult decisions about allocation. Some treatments would be delayed. Others would become unavailable entirely. But perhaps the most destabilizing impact would be psychological. Markets are built on confidence. Once it becomes clear that the semiconductor shortage is not temporary, financial systems would react violently. Investors would rush to price in a future where growth is constrained not by demand, but by physics and geopolitics. Stock markets would fall. Credit would tighten. Governments would intervene. And when governments intervene during systemic crises, the rules change. History offers a clear pattern. When faced with existential threats, states prioritize survival over ideology. Property rights become negotiable. Trade norms are suspended. Capital controls appear. Industries are nationalized in all but name. The free market operates only as long as it serves stability. This is where the semiconductor crisis intersects with a deeper vulnerability in the global order. For decades, efficiency was treated as the highest virtue. Redundancy was waste. Resilience was an afterthought. Supply chains were stretched across continents to shave fractions of a percent off costs. The system worked beautifully until it didn't. Now, leaders are discovering that some things cannot be optimized without risk. Chips are one of them. Energy is another. Currency systems may be next. Concentration creates power, but it also creates choke points. And choke points invite leverage. China understands this dynamic very well. It has spent years studying how economic interdependence can be weaponized. It has watched sanctions reshape global finance. It has observed how supply restrictions can cripple entire industries. Taiwan's semiconductor dominance is not just an asset to be seized or destroyed. It is a pressure point to be exploited. At the same time, China faces its own constraints. Its domestic semiconductor industry lags behind at the cutting edge. Its technology firms rely heavily on Taiwanese manufacturing. A sudden collapse of TSMC would harm Beijing almost as much as Washington. This mutual vulnerability is what has preserved the uneasy status quo. But mutual vulnerability does not guarantee permanent restraint. It only buys time. The longer the world remains dependent on a single geographic node, the more tempting it becomes to gamble. Leaders convince themselves that they can manage the fallout, that the disruption will be temporary, that others will bear more pain than they will. History is filled with such miscalculations. The United States, for its part, is attempting to rebuild what it once dismantled. Factories are being announced. Subsidies are being distributed. Politicians speak of strategic autonomy and industrial renewal. But these efforts collide with realities that cannot be legislated away. Advanced manufacturing is not just about machines. It is about tacit knowledge. It is about engineers who have spent decades solving obscure problems at 3 a.m. It is about supplier networks that evolve together. It is about a culture that treats production as a national mission, not merely a business unit. Trying to recreate that ecosystem from scratch is like trying to regrow an old forest by planting saplings in a parking lot. It can be done, but not quickly, and not without setbacks. Meanwhile, Taiwan lives with a contradiction at the heart of its identity. Its success has kept it safe, but that same success has made it indispensable to forces far larger than itself. The island is no longer just defending its sovereignty. It is carrying the weight of the global economy on its shoulders. Every military exercise, every diplomatic statement, every trade restriction adds stress to a system already stretched thin. The silicon shield was designed as a deterrent, not a permanent solution. And deterrents fail when they are tested repeatedly. The uncomfortable truth is that there may be no clean resolution. Decentralizing semiconductor production will take years, possibly decades. Political tensions are not cooling. Technological demand is accelerating, not slowing. Artificial intelligence, automation, and digital infrastructure will require more advanced chips than ever before. We are entering an era where the most important resource on Earth is not oil, land, or labor, but the ability to etch intelligence into matter. And that ability remains dangerously concentrated. The world is not sleepwalking toward this crisis. It is walking toward it with eyes open, aware of the risks, but constrained by past decisions and present realities. What happens next will depend not on engineering alone, but on judgment, restraint, and timing. And history suggests that those are the scarcest resources of all. The story of the global semiconductor war is not ultimately about Taiwan, or China, or the United States. It is about a deeper illusion that defined the modern era. The belief that efficiency is the same thing as strength. For decades, the world optimized everything. Supply chains were stretched thinner. Inventories were minimized. Production was centralized. On spreadsheets, the system looked flawless. In reality, it became brittle. We told ourselves that markets would always correct disruptions, that globalization guaranteed stability, that technology would outrun geopolitics. We forgot an older truth. Power does not disappear when economies intertwine. It simply changes form. Control over territory becomes control over choke points. Military dominance becomes manufacturing dominance. War becomes leverage. Semiconductors revealed this transformation more clearly than any resource before them. They are not merely components. They are the medium through which intelligence, automation, and force now flow. Whoever controls their production does not just influence markets. They influence what is possible. Taiwan did not set out to hold the world hostage. It set out to survive. The silicon shield was born from vulnerability, not ambition. But once the world reorganized itself around that shield, dependence became unavoidable. Every innovation layered on top of it. Artificial intelligence, autonomous weapons, digital finance, smart infrastructure. Each advancement tightened the knot. Now, the global system finds itself in a paradox with no clean exit. Moving production elsewhere takes time we may not have. Leaving it concentrated carries risks we can no longer ignore. Deterrence relies on rational actors, but history shows that rationality bends under pressure, pride, and fear. This is why the semiconductor question will define the coming decades. Not because chips are scarce, but because trust is trust that supply will continue. Trust that rivals will restrain themselves. Trust that no one will test the system too hard. The world has entered an age where collapse does not require conquest. It only requires interruption. No missiles need to fly. No cities need to burn. The most devastating weapon of the 21st century may simply be the ability to stop a factory. And if that happens, the consequences will not be evenly shared. The poorest will feel it first. The richest will feel it last. Governments will respond not with ideals, but with force. Borders will harden. Capital will be trapped. Freedoms that once felt permanent will become conditional. We have seen this movie before, just with different props. In moments of true crisis, societies do not debate philosophy. They act. They seize. They ration. They redefine what belongs to whom. Technology does not save us from that reality. It accelerates it. The uncomfortable lesson is that technological progress without strategic foresight creates fragility, not security. We built a world that can think faster, compute more, and automate everything, yet cannot tolerate a single point of failure. Taiwan sits at the center of this contradiction, not as a villain, but as a mirror. It reflects the cost of choices made far away, over many years, in boardrooms and ministries that valued efficiency over resilience. Whether the silicon shield holds or breaks will depend on decisions that have not yet been made. But one thing is already clear. The era of pretending that technology exists outside politics is over. The future will not be decided solely by innovation, or markets, or even armies. It will be decided by who controls the foundations beneath them and by whether the world learns, in time, that some systems are too important to be left fragile. Because when the flow of silicon stops, modern civilization does not slow down. It goes dark. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video and want to stay updated with more insights on finance, make sure to subscribe to my channel, Financial Coin. And don't forget to hit that bell icon so you never miss our latest videos.